panelists are speaking, I also want to encourage you to use the chat feature to begin asking questions. Taylor and Kendrick will keep an eye on the chat and can ask your questions once we have opened up the Q&A portion. Now, without further ado, I will hand the floor over to Mayor John Dennis so he can talk about sustainability in West Lafayette and the broader Tippecanoe community.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's, once again, I think we're getting kind of used to doing all this stuff on smaller screens instead of in person. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems to be second nature now. You know, I came to a city. I've lived in West Lafayette all my life. The only time I was away is when I went to college, lived in Ireland, went to grad school. So West Lafayette's the only community I know. However, I did serve in Lafayette. So I worked there for quite some time also. And what that did is it allowed for me to have a real strong level of awareness about the similarities between both communities and the uniqueness of both communities. And when we talk about West Lafayette, that's when we talk about a community that has a lot of strengths when it comes to having a vision that goes beyond some of the cliches that you might read in the newspaper or hear on the news. You know, having a very vibrant population when we have over 40,000+ students, and you're talking about that generation between the ages of 18 to say around 24, they bring an entirely different mindset to some of the problems and circumstances that we're all dealing with, both as political leaders and as just individuals residing within the community. You know, West Lafayette was a trendsetter long before I was ever mayor. Mayor Marjoram and Mayor Mills both were intimately involved in getting us involved in Go Greener commissions and starting recycling programs. West Lafayette had the vision to realize that that dumps, garbage dumps, and sanitation areas are generally finite. And I was fortunate enough to pick up those programs when they were pretty far down the road. As mayor, I realized that there was a lot of things that we could do and a lot of things that we must do. I take climate change very seriously. I'm an avid runner, so I inhale and exhale a lot of the air out there when I'm running. So I want it to be as pure as possible. You know, when we started realizing that there are things that we do in such a way that we're stepping on our own foot, it was pretty easy to convince our council some of the directions that we needed to go. And I think one of the biggest starts that we did was dedicating a lot of our resources to improve the safety of bicyclists in our community. We realized that there, you know, due to our density, you know, our population density and our small geographic footprint, there were a lot of challenges that our bicycling community basically were having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, just when they were trying to do the right thing. I have a dog in here, she just wanted to come and say hi. When they were trying to do the right thing about commuting to work via bicycle. Our bike lanes were a little bit confusing, and our trail network didn't quite get us to where we needed to go. We had a vibrant downtown area that we were revitalizing, and we needed to go ahead and make sure they had the necessary hookup with that. We also needed to do some traffic signalization and some traffic changing the directions of some of our traffic, sort of de-densifying some of our roads and streets. We had to improve the connectivity between neighborhoods and our trail networks too, and our park systems. You know, all of that was done with the focus of making sure that we can have an outdoor environment that's healthy and also have an outdoor environment that's accessible and safe. And you know, we are not done yet. We're still in the process of doing that. But we were recently named a bicycle city, which is a pretty significant acknowledgement. It was a federal award. One of our former employees, a gentleman by the name of Marcus Smith, was intimately involved in that. He was our assistant city engineer at the time, and he was able to make that happen for us. But we still have a long way to go. You know, most communities and anybody that's in elected office will tell you, and Peter, I'm sure can chime in on this. You know, we have limited resources as local government. You know, there are things that we must do, things that we need to do, and things that we want to do. And one of the ways that we generate that revenue is through development. And by development, that means bringing in companies, corporations, and residential areas that pay taxes so that we will have some revenue to do some subjective things with, and then obviously do things that we're deeply obligated to do. But our goal is always try to make sure that when we do development, that it meets the needs of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And with that understanding, we can be very selective about the kind of things that we approve and that we don't approve. And I have been so fortunate to work with an incredible council. We really do have a council here in the city of West Lafayette who gets it. And I'm high-fiving him on the internet. Our council president, Peter Bunder, is very much in touch with the needs of the citizenry. Usually because councils meet once a month and they generally deal with the stuff that's on an agenda, the presumption is that they're 5-minute managers, but not so in West Lafayette. Our councils are deeply engaged and incredibly passionate about making sure that we do the right thing. If we had a magic wand and could say, what does our community look like? If we wanted to make our community sustainable, what would it look like? And you would get in this position where you would draw 3 circles, and then in the intersecting circles, there would be areas that would be perfection. You would have the environment, you would have the economy, and you would have the safety and the security of society, of our citizenry. And in the middle, where all those circles intersect, is where all the environmental needs would come into play, whether it be the environment as we know it, clean air, clean water, drinkable water, lots of green space, etc., and also the social environment, to where each and every one of us could be who we are and what we are, and do it without fear of harassment or abuse. That would be the perfect society. And as a mayor, that's what I strive for. But unfortunately, as we all know, there are challenges out there that we're aware of, and I fear that there are challenges out there that we are not. Having worked in local government, or not in local government, in government in general, all of my life, I have never worked for the private sector. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but there has truly been a shift in the perception of government and then the expectation of government. And I meet that every day in my job, and I'm sure Peter does too. The more that you're out and about, the more interactivity you have with the citizenry, especially a dynamic citizenry like we have here in West Lafayette, the more information that you get on how to provide the essential services that your citizens require, and also to make sure that you're looking out for their best interest. And the best interests oftentimes are on somewhat of a meter, and they shift based upon the national political environment. And after the last 4-year-long nightmare that we've been exposed to, there is a lot of things that we realize now that we can do so much better. And a lot of that has to do specifically with how we treat our environment. And as I said earlier, governments, there are things that they must do to be able to provide the essential services to their citizenry. And that costs money. And most of that money comes from taxes, whether it be the business taxes that are out there for development, like I indicated earlier, or the property taxes and the personal taxes that we have with our citizenry. And that's a very finite, and in some cases, very small pot. But with an activist community, with a community that is passionate about their environment, passionate about social issues, it's allowed for us to have the continued success that I'm very proud of. So overall, I think one thing that we know for sure. Hi, buddy. My grandson just popped in. That's working from home. Sorry about that. Go ahead and let Abby out, please. Just go ahead and open the door. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Sorry about that. I completely lost my train of thought. But the whole point is that as local government, we understand the necessity for service. We understand that that's our main objective for being here. We understand our obligation and our duty to make sure that when we pass on the baton, what we leave our successors, what we leave our children and our grandchildren is a much better place than we left. So, and I'm going to get up real quick and close the door if you don't mind.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. All right, Councilman Bunder.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Can I just say that the setup for this meeting is excellent. It is clever. It is brilliant to put together the pandemic and sustainability and race relations in one paragraph at the top of a page is a great idea. because they all do go together. And I know why they all go together now. I do, because I just finished a book by Heather McGhee. Has anybody read this? Anybody read The Sum of Us is the title. And it's a lot of fun. And she says that the reason that we have trouble with pandemics and race relations and the environment is that baked into the American system is this given, that white men must not suffer. White men must not suffer. That's the reason for just about everything. If race is a problem, then quick, add Jim Crow laws, Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp. White men cannot suffer. If there's a bad winter in Houston, then fly to Cancun because white men can't suffer. And if there's a pandemic, then downplay it, except if you have the vaccine, then we all know that white men don't suffer and everybody else can just sort of do what they can do. There are prejudices that are built into the system, and your first paragraph takes us to that place, and that's really, really good. So thanks for doing that. The city of West Lafayette does a really good job on the environment. We really try. We try harder than most, and we do some things that are really interesting. Our chief claim to fame are the digesters down on the river at the sewage treatment plant. Yeah, I like those. Whole generation, we use gas from junk to run the plant, and that's really cool. And we did that before it was cool, right? We've been doing that for 2008, 2009. That's a good thing. I think intellectually, because we're at Purdue University, we have lots of bright people, and because they all knock on my door, at least during an election year, to complain about things like the way in which we treat the environment. We've been able to say that we need a climate action plan, that we need a climate resilient community, and that there's a climate emergency. We can say all that, and then the other step becomes, how do we practically live that out? But it's hard to be a city in the state of Indiana. The word you will hear over and over again is preemption. Anytime we try and do something good, anytime any city tries to do anything that is outside of the general ideology of the state of Indiana, the state government says, you can do anything you want except the following list of several hundred things. And one of the things you can't do is legislate on the environment particularly. Can you even talk about wetlands? We'll see by the end of this session, right? We can't begin charge of that zoning. So it is a good place to be, and a good place to be talking about sustainability and resiliency. And I'm so glad that we're doing that. We're pedaling the bicycle very hard. And spending as much money as we can. I would like to spend more, but we're spending as much money as we can. And it's really hard in Indiana. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Dr. Lindsey Payne.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. As an ESE alum, I'm really excited to be at this event. So I just thought I would tell you guys a little bit about Go Greener itself, so that everyone is aware of who we are and what we do. So one of the hats that I wear outside of my Purdue job is the chair of the Go Greener Commission. And we're really tasked with promoting and enhancing sustainable environmental well-being for the city of West Lafayette. And that's, among the residents in the community. And we're not just talking about present generations, but also future generations as well. We have 12 members on our commission. 3 are appointed by the mayor, 4 by city council, and then 5 are appointed by the commission itself. And we will be likely adding a 3rd member next month. Hopefully that will be a youth commissioner position, which would be a junior or senior from West Lafayette High School. So that's pretty exciting as well. We really are, I guess you could say, tasked with public awareness building. We do a lot of education and outreach in the community. I think we also serve as what I consider a connector. So we bring together, programming initiatives and people around sustainability challenges. So maybe it's stormwater management, maybe it is food waste, as Peter talked about, and the biodigester, but we're really tasked with trying to elevate the conversation around those issues. And then I think we also serve as I don't know if hall monitor is a really outdated term, but as a hall monitor that kind of, advises the mayor and city council, but also really sort of sits there and makes sure that green is at the forefront of conversation when we're talking about everything from development to programming and things like that. We have worked on a variety of initiatives throughout the years, bike lane safety, stormwater management. As Peter had mentioned, food waste is a really big initiative that we are involved with in partnership with the city of West Lafayette, both the wastewater treatment plant and the streets and sanitation department. And then, recently we've gotten engaged in what I would call climate action planning, and that's both at the city level, so supporting West Lafayette and their city departments as they work towards their climate action plan. And then also engaged as more of an advisory space for the Greater Lafayette climate action process. And that's where both cities as well as the county have come together and decided that they're going to participate in a regional effort for climate action planning. So how do we function? Well, I like to say we're part of the city, but we don't really have direct oversight from the city. So I like to work very collaboratively with John, with Peter, but sometimes we will respectfully disagree. And we're allowed to do that publicly because we're not, directly under the city. And so I kind of think we serve as a squeaky wheel, which is nice to have an exterior structure that continues to push and motivate around some of these issues. And then the last kind of group I would say we work with very closely are Purdue students through volunteer partnerships, senior design teams. And we, over the last, I feel like it's been the last 5 or 6 years, have had a student serve as a commissioner. And right now we have 3 on the commission that are actually 2 graduate students. Kayla is one of them, as well as an undergrad serving on the commission. So how did 2020 impact us? Well, I think like many of you, we had to shift a lot of our programming to virtual settings, which in some ways did mean we paused a lot of our engagement. We were really deep into climate action planning and getting ready to do a lot of community engagement and outreach, and we had to pause a lot of that. We tried some virtual spaces, it wasn't very effective. So now we're trying to think differently about how we could create hybrid forms of engagement with the community, as well as really thinking about getting Purdue students involved in those spaces as well. But beyond, Go Greener, I've been thinking about this a lot. I feel like 2020 really highlighted, I would say, our vulnerabilities. And I think why that thinking about those pillars of sustainability that John had mentioned, the social, the economic, and the environmental really do matter. Because, public health impacts economies and it exacerbates disparities, and economics drives decision-making, and so on, right? And we know that we really can't shore up one leg of a 3-legged stool and hope it doesn't tip over, because it's going to if you only have one leg that's stable. And I think this really relates to climate action, specifically when we talk about vulnerabilities, because, as a society, we have to determine whether those vulnerabilities matter, because the vulnerabilities are people, right? And people that are most likely to be adversely affected by climate change, and perhaps most likely unable to respond to extreme events that are associated with climate change. And that's really because, perhaps they don't have the means to do so, whatever it is that creates that social vulnerability that they experience. And we're not talking about those in other communities, sub-Saharan African communities or anything like that. I'm talking about our own backyard. And these are people that live in the floodplains. Maybe they don't have air conditioning. They don't speak the majority language here. So I think if we think about, our population as a collective group, we really can get at some of those social justice challenges that I think you guys were speaking to when you really named the symposium this year, because, truly the well-being of all is perhaps the way to go versus maybe the well-being of a few, as Peter was alluding to, with perhaps the white men is most important. next steps, I think, for Go Greener and in this new vision of what 2021 is going to be, we'll continue to focus on our bread and butter, which is education and outreach around local sustainability challenges at large. And, again, what that format will look like, we're still trying to figure that out. We're going to continue to advise and support with our climate action plan. And then what we'd like to do, I think, more, and Peter, I appreciate you bringing this up, is that, I think we need to be more engaged in the state level policy department, because a lot of our local efforts, specifically around, let's say, climate action, for example, will be greatly impacted with some of these state level policies that may come to fruition in the next few months, impacting our efforts and our progress towards, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So as a commission, we're trying to figure out where that sweet spot is for us in terms of engagement. And I think, the last thing I'll kind of end with, and I think for those of you that know me, you won't be surprised by this, but it's really just, I would say, a call to action, because I think that's really the hard part. And I guess, I think it's hard to get up, put in the sweat equity, and do more than just be that armchair environmentalist. I'm not sure I totally know how to do it, but I'm certainly trying. And I think that means that we have to care, and we have to care more about metrics and narrow definitions of sustainability. And I think that means thinking beyond costs, beyond even perhaps clean water, to community well-being and that broader, societal ideal that we could achieve. And to do that, this is where the call to action is like, we've got to get in the game. And, I don't know how many of you are NCAA fans, but I'm not actually talking about the superstar starting lineup. I'm talking about the role players. And these are the folks that go out and they put in the work, but they don't often get the glory. And I think we need a lot more of those types of people, discovering new technologies, enacting federal policies is fantastic, right? It's a wonderful thing for us to do, but it's really the stuff that I would call as unsexy. And that's the role player stuff that perhaps matters the most. So what I'm talking about is, the persistence in calling, writing, emailing your elected officials, doing that over and over again, perhaps without results, spending hours attending community meetings, city council meetings, so that you're the person that stands up when there's an environmental issue that comes onto the agenda. It's pushing on the education and the outreach, the awareness building with those that don't listen or don't care. It's helping support local policies and initiatives, only as to have them rendered maybe irrelevant at the state level. And I think, even a concrete example for students, and this is real time, is urging your Purdue administration to participate in climate action planning efforts with our two great cities in our county. And I think that's really something that, again, not sexy, not great, but if you can put in the time and you can organize, I really feel like we can move the dial on some of these things, and ultimately create a collective consciousness and movement for change. And if you ever want to talk to someone about how to do that or how you can dial in, I'm 100% available to sit down with any of you. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. And Annabel, I guess, take it away and tell us all about what you are doing as someone who's truly engaged.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Annabel Prokoby, and I'm a junior at West Lafayette High School, and a member of West Lafayette Climate Strikes. So yeah, I'll just start by talking about what we've been doing in the past in terms of student climate activism. So we started just a couple years ago with West Lafayette Climate Strikes, just planning climate strikes and advocating for the climate resolution that was passed in 2019. And since then, we've actually been fortunate enough to get involved in the process and been able to be active in the climate action plan development, different city initiatives to take the climate crisis seriously, work towards a more sustainable future. And this has been really, I think, this has helped us to make a lot of progress in the city, just to be, as Lindsey was saying, it pushes us more. And when you have those people who are engaged, like a lot of my friends, myself, I think we can push the city to new limits. And with that being said, from my perspective, I do see West Lafayette as a leader in climate action and in sustainability, compared to, a lot of cities in Indiana, we have taken a lot of pretty bold commitments, and I think that the city has shown that they are willing to follow through with them. And that is really, really important. And I think that that deserves some recognition, some applause for that. And obviously always remembering that there is that next step that we can take. There's always that, we can always be pushed a little bit farther. We can always do a little bit more. So I also think that West Lafayette has embraced this sort of idea that when city leaders and younger people, younger activists, students can come together to tackle the challenges that we're faced, whether it be with climate action, with diversity, any of the other issues that we're facing, and we take steps towards a more sustainable future, we can make a lot more progress. So something that West Lafayette Climate Strikes did over the fall was we launched a statewide climate campaign. And we were kind of spurred to do this because we saw how progressive West Lafayette was already being and how our leaders were really stepping up to the challenge. And we really didn't see too much more that we needed to do here to push farther, other than, some of the things I mentioned. But we really have seen a lack in statewide action and in other local governments around the state in terms of sustainability and taking the climate crisis seriously. So something that we've actually been able to do with that initiative is share our experiences of working with the West Lafayette government and just of the West Lafayette government as a model for climate action and sustainability with other students and other local governments so that they can hopefully make some similar progress and start to really reduce their contributions to the climate crisis. So yeah, with that being said, the next steps that I would love to see the city take is just staying committed with what they've already committed to, following through with what they've committed to in the climate resolution, with the climate action plan, and if possible, taking more bold measures. As Peter said, if funding is obviously an issue, but doing what the city can to stay committed to their goals. And then what I would also love to see is just the city having these sorts of conversations with other local governments, sharing what they've learned, what has worked for them and the progress that they've made, so that other cities, as I said, can reduce their emissions and also become climate leaders. So hopefully this can lead to some major successes, not only in our community, but also in communities around the state, and lead to a more prosperous future. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really great. Thank you all so much for your presentations. I think we all have a lot to think about, a lot to talk about now. And so I'll hand it over to Taylor and Kendrick. And if everyone wants to go ahead and start posting their questions in the chat and get the conversation started.
Thank you, Kayla, for organizing this panel. This has been really great. And I'm just going to request again that people send their questions via the chat. If you do wish to say your question in person, please raise your hand if you know how. And if you're here to protest or cause a disturbance, you will be kicked out from the Zoom meeting if you're not willing to engage in a civil conversation with our panelists who we are honored to have with us today. So with that being said, I'd like to just open up the discussion with a broad question that any and all of the panelists can chime into. So with hindsight being 2020, what lessons can we learn or have we learned from the events of 2020? For example, how might we work to address decades of social injustice while making progress on sustainability? And why is it important to keep both of these goals in mind?
How do we decide who answers which first? I guess I'm going to do first then.
You're the mayor. You get to go first.
Yeah, lucky me. Government has tried sometimes not so well. in figuring out a way to keep their elected officials elected, and yet also try to figure out a way to show some sort of understanding of what's going on in our social environment and with some of the underserved members of our population. And as an elected person, I'm not trying to stand up here and be a hypocrite and say, oh, those people. The fact of the matter, it just seems so glaringly obvious that there is a significant lack of political courage in this country. And there's an extremely strong group of people that take advantage of that. And I'm talking specifically on the right. There's unfortunately challenges that are brought forward to elected officials, whether they be a small city council or a large city mayor or a legislator at the state level, that basically it's not necessarily the type of conversation that you would hope to have. If you had a vision of running your hometown like I did, or if you had a vision of participating in local government like so many people have, we all go into that with an idealistic approach of what we're going to do to make things better. And honestly, that's the whole idea of being a public servant, is you make things better. But the challenges that are put in front of you sometimes allude to you, or at least lead you to believe that this is going to be a painful process, and nobody's going to deliberately stick their hand in an open flame. And I think that's where we fail, is because elected officials don't have the courage to take a bold stand to create great change. I mean, look at what was going on in our society 50, 60 years ago. Back in the first iteration, when we had the race riots in the 60s, and when we had the uprising of our youth in our colleges and our high schools, a lot of the folks who were around during the Depression didn't understand that type of social confrontation and tried everything within their power to suppress it. And that included elected officials, because again, these folks that were voting told them how to behave. And in some cases, that dynamic on a very, very much more subtle level still exists. There's a presumption, if you have a certain animal after your political affiliation, that there's a certain code of conduct that you have to abide by. And if you don't, then the potential of not being around very long exists. But if you firmly believe in what you're doing, and that what you're doing is the right thing, then you just move forward. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. There is a general lack of political courage in some elected officials. There's also a lack of understanding on the part of the citizenry that some of those folks serve. I'm very fortunate. I go to work and I learn something every day. Honest to God, it's just that way. And Lindsey is one of my favorite teachers. She's so nice when she tells me how wrong I am. But there's also, elected officials that come in with a very small mind about what they want to get accomplished. And it's predicated on a small group of people that have influenced them. And again, I say that with the understanding that could be the perception of what I'm doing, but on a more open-minded side. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. And I don't know how to solve that. We have pure, unadulterated data that tells us where we are going in society, both socially and environmentally. It's irrefutable. And yet people still look at that and think it's a hoax. And it's shameful. So for me, I think one of the greatest things that we can empower people to do is vote. Pick your leadership. Be subjective about who you pick. Go beyond the party affiliation. Do your research. Do your homework. Show up at debates. Ask questions. Stop by their office. Ask questions. It can be uncomfortable sometimes. I have been in that position where I've been put on the spot and I didn't have the right answer. And it was a very strong learning experience for me. And in the same thing, I have put people on the spot. I've had the fortunate opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and also go down to the state and talk to governors and senators and other elected officials and ask not just why, but in some cases, why not? And oftentimes the answers aren't very satisfying. And that's kind of a sad thing to report. But it's not because I feel that me as an individual, I don't matter. But if I got 500 people standing behind me, or if I got a petition that's as thick as a New York phone book, I'm going to get some attention that way. So pardon me for my long-windedness, but to summarize, there's a lack of political courage amongst elected officials. There's a degree of apathy with some of our population base, and there's a lack of respect for the activism that some of our youth, middle-aged, and old folks have. Dennis out. Sorry. I talk too much.
So we do have some questions in the chat, and we have a few that are related to each other. One is, what kind of investments do you see the city taking towards a cleaner environment here? And related to that is, given preemption by the state, what options are available on the local level? And then we also have a student interested in ways that Purdue students, what role Purdue students can play in advocating for climate change, and tips on partnering with some organizations.
I guess that's me again. And Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you when I get done to help fill in the blanks that I guarantee you that I will have. Activism should be in capital letters. You know, government people do respond to the electorate. They do understand that those people know what they're talking about, because it's imperative that they get the message communicated abundantly, clearly, and repetitively. That works. You know, when we talk about what we've done as a community, and again, I don't have my laundry list in front of me, but one of the major drivers of everything that we do is our environment, whether it be bicycles, whether it be having charging stations for electric cars, whether it be about making sure when we purchase equipment that we do it with the environment in mind, even down to the social environment, by hiring a social worker to be with our police department. We are a very progressive community to some degree. I don't know that we necessarily think outside of the box, but we think in a much bigger one. And I think that allows for us to do things with a little bit more freedom. I have a very supportive council. I get along with them and they're friends, and we understand what the right thing to do is. Unfortunately, sometimes I have to be the one that says we can't afford that, because again, back to question number one, you know, our resources are limited. But I think as leaders in our community in West Lafayette, and to some degree even throughout Tippecanoe County, we lead by example. You know, we were the first one to start a recycling program. We're the first one to make sure that our vehicles that we use aren't going to blow up the environment. You know, we make sure that our police officers are well trained and have professional services on duty with them. You know, we make sure that we have these awkward conversations, and we encourage people to participate with us. We truly want to be a government that works and serves for its citizens, and hopefully that's what we're doing. But the other side is that there's always things that we can do better. You know, we realize having a major university within our city limits, the hope would be that we would be in a position to have greater influence there. But I can't say that we've met that threshold yet. I think that there's things that we could do better in a collaborative spirit with Purdue. That's something that we can work further towards. The other thing is that for us to do things in our city, we cannot escape the influence that other communities have on our city. Take the Wabash River, for instance. I'm involved in a group that's called REC, the Wabash River Enhancement Program. And one of our major priorities is to make sure that the Wabash River will be fishable, swimmable, and at some time way in the future, possibly even drinkable. But anybody that lives upstream from us, if they're not buying into that, then we have a lot of homework and a lot of activity to get taken care of before that can be done. Same thing, working in an environment that has a lot of agriculture in it. You know, farmers are doing their best to do what they have to do to provide food sources for, in some cases, the world. That doesn't necessarily mean that some of the products that they're putting on their crops is the greatest thing for the environment, the greatest thing for the soil, the greatest thing when it gets aerated into the environment, the greatest thing to breathe. My dog just stuck her head. She wanted to say hi. So there's a lot of things that we as local leaders can and should, and in my administration, we have done, but there's so much more that we could do. I hope that helped.
I'm going to go get my dog so I can be part of this conversation.
Can you hear her? I mean, she's wearing her, she's shaking her head. I mean, again, I can hear you, but I got to let her out.
Bye, Mayor. If you have a question about how to get involved in government or in the community, call Lindsey Payne. Don't call me, call Lindsey, because she has all the answers to all of that. The Go Greener Commission has a great advantage because once upon a time, it was a mayoral committee. Now it's part of the ordinance structure of the city. People from outside of the city of West Lafayette can contribute, and people who are at Purdue University can contribute, and you get to have people from the city be a part of your meetings. So if there is a place to start, email Lindsey, because I know she'll just love to hear from you, and will respond almost immediately to any requests that you have. The other part of the question is how we move towards adding on to the things that we do. I mean, everybody has a list. The biggest thing we can do, and it's an advantage to live in a college town, is to hold up the notion that a community exists. We have a problem sometimes with a mask mandate in West Lafayette. People write us nasty letters. Most of the people who write us nasty letters don't live within the city limits or vote for us, okay? So that's comforting. But the notion that community is an important thing is something that we are holding up by being in these little boxes tonight, right? This is one of the ways that we begin to say, we're all in this together. How can we help you? How can you help us with all of the issues that were in the sort of opening paragraph? If we can reestablish the importance of community, if we can act that out, then we'll be a better community for everybody. Thanks.
And I'm going to jump in on that. And yes, you can all email me. Thank you, Peter and John. I put my email in the chat, so anytime, please email me. But I wanted to jump in on that community comment because I think, you know, I know not everyone here is a Purdue student or affiliated with Purdue, but I think a lot of you are. And so I'm gonna put on just my Purdue hat and say that, you know, you have the opportunity as students to organize and create a collective action movement at your university, because you are the clients of the university. And so your voices, if you are cohesive, organized, clear in your messaging, can have a lot of impact. And I'll go back to, I think someone asked, like, what are ways you can get involved? And one of the things I really think is important is, you know, pushing Purdue to be truly that, you know, premier institution when it comes to sustainability, climate action, and all those things. And I think we have some work to do. And I wish Michael was here to talk to you about what we do have at the university, because we certainly do a lot of great things, but I think that's an immediate opportunity you guys can leverage. But more broadly, you know, I think get outside of Purdue at the same time and engage in the community. Contact me. You can talk Kayla as part of the Go Greener Commission. I mean, there's a lot of us here that can talk about things that you can do specifically to get engaged in the place in which you live and are spending the next, you know, so many years of your life.
Lindsey, could I chime in and plug some
go, Frannie.
Organizations too? So I know I haven't spoken yet, and there's some new people that joined. So I'm Frannie Kelley, the current president of Student Sustainability Council. So we are Purdue affiliated. We're made up of several committees and projects. And then there's also the Purdue Student Government Sustainability Committee. And then to name a couple Purdue non-affiliated ones that are mostly made up of students, there's the West Lafayette Students for Climate Action and the Sunrise Movement Chapter. And then also broadly, all four of us work together on the Purdue Carbon Neutrality Initiative. So just to add on to what Lindsey was saying, like there's groups and projects going on for like any area of sustainability you're interested in for Purdue students. Thank you, Frannie, for chiming in on those opportunities. And maybe people, if they're more interested, can contact you further about those sustainability options as well. So we have another question for most of the panelists, and that's, what are some barriers that you as leaders and activists face that students and residents of West Lafayette can help remedy?
So Annabelle, I'm going to put you on the spot there because I think you're probably the most qualified to speak to that out of all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. what I see as an activist is just an education in the community about climate change. A lot of people are educated about what we need to be doing and what the risks are that we're facing, but a lot of people also aren't. And having those people not on the same page is kind of difficult. It's hard to have like a unified message when a lot of the community doesn't agree. So just how I guess the community can help with that is if someone, just providing education, providing reliable sites that people can use to educate themselves about climate change, and maybe helping to institute like an education program or something like that, just to help the community become more educated on the topic.
Yeah, I think, Annabel, I think you're spot on with that. That's something that I know as a commission we've really struggled with as well. And I think part of it comes from the fact that we're a little bit of a loss in terms of creative ideas. So if you have creative ideas and ways to engage the public, I know I had a conversation with Mayor Dennis just the other day about a certain demographic that's hard to reach in this community. And how do we come up with clever ways that are going to engage them in this dialogue and bring them into the fold? They may not be, your early adopters, 100% participants, but at least they're having the conversation. So again, like, talk to me, come to Go Greener meetings, and we would certainly love energy and ideas from anyone.
So we do have a related question directed to Lindsey Payne. You mentioned there are times that as an advisor to local government, you sometimes disagree with city leaders about the path forward for a sustainable future. What are some specific topics you have disagreed on?
Well, I don't know, John, I don't feel like we've disagreed on too much. Well, I think more than anything, we sometimes maybe want to push a little harder than perhaps our elected officials want to push, but that's okay for us. It doesn't mean that the elected officials don't want to do that. It's just that they're perhaps not in the best position. So it's appropriate for us as more of an advocacy group to do that. I don't think we've really disagreed on much to date. Now, that doesn't mean that there might be a time that I'll have to sit politely in Mayor Dennis's office and say, I hear you, but I don't agree with you. And that's okay. I still think we'll be friends.
No, we most certainly will. And a lot also is, there's the unfortunate reality of the political process is that it's not designed to do things effectively and efficiently in a very short time span. Sometimes I don't necessarily say no, but I say not right now. If we want to get this thing through, this is what we have to do to get it done. And so in some cases, I'm kind of like a coach more than a teacher or a disciplinarian or a parent. It's just a matter of saying, okay, I'd love to be able to do that too, but that isn't going to get it, in this environment. We have to go about it through a system of education. It's some form of public outreach, get it in front of the decision makers, get it in front of the people that are going to actually vote and approve our activity. And that takes sometimes a minimum of 2 months. And that's if it doesn't get tabled. And depending upon the legislation, it could really have a lot of background work that needs to be done. Because when you're dealing with a global issue and you're trying to do something to affect that locally, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yes. And I think too, part of the reason why I don't think we have deep, intense disagreements is that we have a relationship that we've built over time. And I think that's critical to any of this kind of work, be it at the local level, the federal level, just the activism level. It's developing those relationships and learning, who your partners are, how you can work together, even though you may disagree on an issue. How do you move forward in these spaces? And I see Iris put a question in here. Can we do that one, Taylor? Is that okay?
Sure. Go ahead.
So Peter made a comment about, a lot of the state is kind of being preemptive in their legislation, and there is a proposed bill, HB 1191, ban on the ban, right? So this idea, so I don't know how long ago this was, but Bloomington was looking at a plastic bag ban. And so the state came down with a ban on bans. So you can't ban plastic bags. So there is
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking, the environment, and no pun intended, that we work in. Yeah.
Right. So, oh, it's Jim. Hi, Jim. This is not Iris. So there's some legislation coming through right now. Jim, do you want to talk about it? You might. Oh, come on. No.
No. Oh well.
Okay, maybe you
I
can't.
know they banned in Dublin, Ireland, they banned plastic bags.
Well, this is actually in relation to, I guess you could say, all of our local climate action efforts and some legislation that's pending that will basically be preemptive against us doing these things. And so the question was, what is the plan for testimony? We don't have one yet. It's something that we need to do, but it's not in the docket just yet.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now.
There you go, Jim.
I changed my name and I can't unmute myself, but that's okay. I let go. And Shannon Anderson really is our point person at Earth Charter Indiana on these sorts of issues. I have a more shallow and emotional reaction to these sorts of things. What I understand is that this is happening all over the country in multiple states, where preemptively banning the bans of natural gas at some aspects of city government really flies in the face of exactly what you all have been doing in West Lafayette and what another 10 cities have done or more in Indiana, trying to electrify and move everything to renewable energy. I know Shannon, were she here, might kvetch just a little bit and say it's been hard to cut through the noise and get municipalities to step up to address this particular bill. There's so many bills that are egregious this year, but this one in particular really, really confronts the municipal progress that we've been making.
Liz, do you want to say anything about it? Because I know you've been very active in monitoring legislation.
You mean Liz Solberg?
Yes, I do.
Okay, right. Good grief, all these people. Well, I'm holding up my, let's see, I should probably do this too. Holding up my sheet here. I was attending for 3 or 4 hours today, the hearing on one of those bills, and the State League submits formal testimony and also has a list locally as well as statewide, encouraging individual actions to get to people's legislators to try and stop. Unfortunately, as Mayor Dennis, as you were saying, and others, unfortunately, the huge effort is stopping the bad bills. And there's a big vote coming up Monday morning on wetlands, which it's just incredible. Today was not a good day for the thing that was happening there. There were probably at least 14 or 15 really good bills that got introduced that never even made it out of committee. You know, things that would have helped us all working with the environment. So we certainly, I have to say though, I have attended, Annabelle, met most of your events. And including what you ought to mention, the wonderful event you had down at the State House a week ago Friday. And it is just so inspiring and hopeful because of all that the upcoming generation is working on to do here. So keep it up, and maybe you want to mention your event down at the State House and your plans maybe for the next legislative session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, our statewide campaign had a strike at the Indianapolis State House last week, where we declared a climate emergency for the state of Indiana as the students, and we sent a letter to Governor Holcomb requesting a meeting with him. So we're hopeful that this can lead to some conversations on the statewide level regarding sustainability and climate. And yeah, as Liz said, our next steps are just to keep putting pressure on them, hopefully introduce some better bills for the next legislative session, so there aren't so many just like bad ones, and specifically hopefully a climate resolution on the statewide level.
So in the interest of time, unless any panelists have any final comments on this, I think we're going to transition into some interactive breakout rooms. So if anyone had questions that they didn't get answered, feel free to stick around, and each of our panelists has been willing, except for the mayor. Thank you, Mayor John Dennis.
Thank you guys so much. You're doing such amazing work, and you guys know how to find me. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I
was just gonna hand it over to you, Kayla, to explain this breakout room process.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you again to all of our panelists, and also thank you to our audience. This discussion has been even more than I hoped it would be, and I'm really glad that we're all here tonight talking about these important issues. So if you're interested in continuing this conversation, please feel free to stick around in this Zoom channel. In just a few minutes, we're going to transition to an interactive Q&A session, which is our kind of experiment to do, an actual small group conversation that we could do in person. And so what we're going to do is have a couple of our panelists and some other local leaders who do things that are great for sustainability in West Lafayette, lead conversations about topics that are relevant and have questions that are important to ask. So if you need to leave, which is perfectly fine, I know we all have our own obligations and it's 7 o'clock, please feel free to leave now. And if you'd like to stay, please just take a minute and we will go ahead and start assigning people to their breakout sessions. All right, everyone. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what we will be talking about in our small group sessions. So our first breakout session is about youth activism in West Lafayette, and it will be moderated by Annabel Prokoby. Our next breakout session is about activism across Indiana, and it will be moderated by Iris O'Donnell Bellisario, who is an intern with the Purdue Climate Change Research Center. Or as an intern, she has worked with scientists and environmental impact groups throughout Indiana. She's also worked on several climate resolutions for the city of West Lafayette. She has successfully advocated for the city to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory, and she is advocating for the development of a plan for the community to achieve carbon neutrality by the date decided upon in the resolution, 2038. Iris works directly with the mayor of West Lafayette and city council to help West Lafayette become resilient. And recently she was recognized as a Hoosier Resilient Hero. Frannie Kelley will moderate a breakout session about student-led sustainability initiatives at Purdue. Frannie is in her third year as an undergraduate student in the Wiles School of Civil Engineering. She's been involved with the Purdue Student Sustainability Council since her freshman year at Purdue. She began in the outreach committee, mostly working on social events and raising awareness about sustainability issues, and now is a sitting president of the council. Dr. Lindsey Payne will facilitate a conversation about sustainability in Tippecanoe and beyond. And finally, Shannon Kang will moderate a discussion about city council and sustainability. Shannon is a West Lafayette City Council representative for District Number 3 and represents the student district and Purdue campus life. She is a junior studying political science, and she serves as the chief of staff for the Purdue student government, as well as a commissioner with the Go Greener Commission. So to get us started, everyone is going to be randomly assigned to one of these 5 topics. After about 10 minutes, participants will receive a message inviting you to transition to another breakout room if you'd like. You're also welcome to stay in the breakout room that you're in, or at any time you can leave and come back to the main session to transition to a different room. And the way that you come back to the main session, if you don't know, is looking in the lower right-hand corner of the Zoom. Once we put you in your breakout session, it will say something like leave breakout room, and then you'll come back into the main session. And if you get kicked out, just click on the Zoom link again and we'll let you in. Okay, everyone ready? All right, let me go ahead and open the breakout rooms now. Hi, everyone. I think we have almost everybody back. It's so nice to see your faces. Okay, well, I just want to say again, thank you so much. This has been really great. I hope that we can continue the conversation in other ways. This is a really important conversation, and I'm so glad you all were here. I also just want to put in a little plug. This is our local panel. We'll be having a global panel tomorrow evening. If you have not already registered, you can register at our ESE Symposium website to get the link. And with that, I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Kayla. This was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kayla, and our panelists.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.